All right. Well, I am pleased to have another repeat guest here today, and you will recognize this one, Miss Jen Stevens, who has authored quite a few books: Delay, Don't Deny, Fast Without Fear, Fast
Feast
Feast,
without fear.
Feast Without
Yeah.
Feast Without
Feast
Fear. I feel
without
like I
fear,
got
right?
something wrong the first time I
That's
had
all
you on,
right.
but okay. And then Fast Feast Repeat. So
Right.
she is really known in this community just for her work on fasting. She has a podcast about fasting. And so Miss Jen Stevens, and she was very gracious to come on my podcast when I very first started this almost a couple of years ago, and I had very few episodes out. I was not known at all really in this community, and she was this best-selling author and well known, and I was at the time just really excited that she came on my show. And so Jen, welcome back first, and thank you for coming on my show when I was a nobody. I'm still a nobody, but anyways,
Well, I was happy to do it. I love
uh,
to come on podcasts, no matter how many people are listening, just because, if it changes one listener's life, then it was worth it.
Well, appreciate you coming back. So,
Well, thank you.
So Miss Jen Stevens, so she has a new book out, which is
Mhm.
why she's back and what we're going to talk about today. Her new book is called Clean-ish. And so I guess first I want to ask, so obviously you're in kind of the fasting community. And so tell us about just what your motivation was. I guess a little bit about Clean-ish, and then
Right.
what was your motivation to write about this?
That's a great question because, going from intermittent fasting to something that's not intermittent fasting was a big leap, even for my publisher, because after Fast Feast Repeat was a New York Times bestseller, I don't know, I didn't really realize how publishing worked. And I was like, now I can write whatever I want and they will publish it. And they're like, no, you're going to write intermittent fasting books until the day you die. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Because I said everything I needed to say about intermittent fasting and Fast Feast Repeat. So I don't need to write a new updated, here's how to fast better. No, I
Right.
already said all that. So I was like, I want to write something else. And the idea from Clean-ish came really about my journey from even before my intermittent fasting days. And I talk about this in Clean-ish back when my son, who's now 22, we actually have two sons. One is 24, but my youngest is 22. And when he was a toddler, he had so many problems with behavior, like tantrums, getting kicked out of daycare, like couldn't control himself, kind of stuff. And we figured out from a fabulous teacher of his who said to us, could it be what he's eating? And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. No, it's not what he's eating. And at that point, I'd been an elementary teacher for a while, um, over 10 years at that point. And I had never heard of a connection between, we all joke about, oh, he's had too much sugar, when a kid was like hyped up after a class party. But I'd never really thought about the connection between really what you're eating and behavior. So I started to dig in. And turns out there was a great deal of research out there showing a connection between, for example, artificial flavors, artificial colors, certain preservatives, and childhood behavior. Dr. Benjamin Feingold did a lot of work with this in the 1970s. So the older listeners to your podcast will remember Phil Donahue, the Phil Donahue show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He came on Phil Donahue and talked about it there. And it was really something people knew back then for a while. And then it kind of lost, people stopped talking about it. But I discovered this community of people who were basically treating their children's ADHD or explosive behavior by changing what they ate and what chemicals they came in contact with. So we discovered that Will was very sensitive to things that you inhaled. He was kind of like that canary in the coal mine kid. He was very chemically sensitive. And so we really cleaned up what we used in the home, what we cleaned with, the shampoo that we put on the children, the toothpaste that they used, things like that. And we eliminated artificial flavors, artificial colors, preservatives, all of that from their diet. That made such a tremendous difference. He stopped getting kicked out of things as long as we really controlled what he was eating. Then as time went on, he, grew out of that. I put that in quotation marks because I really think a lot of it has a link to the gut microbiome. And he was born he had thrush immediately after he was born. So he had some things that, some signs I can look back and know that even as an infant, I think he didn't have a healthy gut microbiome, which goes back to how I ate when I was pregnant, which I wish I could go back and do that differently. But, I didn't know any better at that time. He was born in 1999, and I was taking my prenatal vitamins, and I thought that was good enough, right? You got my vitamins. No, apparently you need a lot more than just a vitamin tablet. So, we actually went away from all of that once Will was better, and we felt like we didn't have to do it anymore. So we gravitated back to, eating more of the standard American diet. I still, felt like, well, it does matter what I clean with, but I wasn't very, religious about it. I bought something that looked like it was probably a good choice and so forth. So fast forward, a lot of years later, and I had my own struggle with obesity. Until 2014, I was 210 pounds. I was officially obese. That's when I started intermittent fasting, went on to lose about 80 pounds, and I have kept it off since 2015, even as I've gone through menopause, which is really, really exciting. But, I wasn't eating clean in any way, shape, or form. I was still eating how I always ate. But a funny thing happened over time. Over time, as I was an intermittent faster and at an ideal weight for my body, I started to become what we call, a food snob in the intermittent fasting community, whereas my tastes were completely changing. Instead of going and getting a latte from our favorite coffee place with all those chemicals and flavor, I no longer liked the way that tasted. It tasted like rat poison. Or, instead of going to a fast food restaurant, I didn't like that food anymore. It didn't taste delicious. So I started gravitating towards eating more real food. And the more real foods you eat, the better the real foods taste. And then those, junk foods, the ultra processed foods no longer taste as good. So we found that was very common in the intermittent fasting community. People would gravitate towards real foods, and it was almost a universal experience over time. So I thought, I would really like to write a book that talks about why we need to, really be careful about what we're eating, putting in our bodies, putting on our bodies, and thinking back to the experience we went through with Will. And like I said, I thought I was doing a really good job. So I started looking into what products I was using, what I was eating. The more research I did for Cleanish, the more I realized I was not doing a good job at all. And one of the main reasons is something called greenwashing. Are you familiar with the term greenwashing?
I don't think so.
Well, you've certainly been a victim of it, I'm sure,
Okay.
because greenwashing is when, they make a product appear like it's healthy, clean, and green on the label,
Okay.
but it's not. Like they might use certain colors or certain wording, like all natural, for example.
Sure.
Or no chemicals used, which is impossible because even water is a chemical. So if something says it has no chemicals in it, I would, what is it? Like a vacuum? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I started looking, I found a resource that, I actually had been familiar with it, but I hadn't been using it. The Environmental Working Group, they have an app, and you can look things up and it rates them based on safety. So I pulled out the app and I started looking at what I was using to clean my house. For example, like I had this dishwashing soap that I used, and I would keep it at the kitchen counter, like right there by the sink in a little pump bottle. And I would use it if I needed to wash dishes, or I would use it to wash my hands. And it was one of those brands that has that sheen of being, natural and good for you. And I ran it through the app, the Environmental Working Group's app. It actually ranked lower or worse than that blue dishwashing liquid we're all familiar with that they use to clean the animals at the oil slicks. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. That mass market, totally, blue hand soap, dishwashing detergent was a better choice than the one that I thought was a good choice. So that like blew my mind. And I'm like, people need to learn how to go through their cabinets and see what's in there. And just by making a few simple swaps, you're really changing what your toxic load ends up being. Because that's really the key. Our bodies are exposed to so many toxins all the time, and our bodies are actually really good at getting rid of a certain amount of toxins. The full title of Cleanish is Eat Mostly Clean, Live Mainly Clean, and Unlock Your Body's Natural Ability to Self-Clean. We have a great self-cleaning, so many systems in our bodies that do that. Our liver, our kidneys, our skin, sweating. But we've become overloaded with too much. We're putting too much in. And so our bodies can't keep up. Yeah. And so it's making these changes that you don't even really notice you're making. I mean, it was zero hard to change out my dishwashing liquid. It was so easy. And I found something that scored way better than either of those options. I'm not using the blue one. I found one that is a whole lot better than that. And, the makeup that I use, what I put on my skin, just by making those changes, you're getting the endocrine disruptors out of your products. And so your body can then handle the things that it's supposed to be able to handle because you're putting less in.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
that was a lot.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the book a little bit, because I know when I talk about this, sometimes I think people get overwhelmed because there's just, I mean, it's literally every time we turn around, whether we're talking about, bottled water or plastics or cosmetics or just the environment. I mean, there's some kind of toxin in there. Yeah. And so I think people get overwhelmed and don't know where to start. So you talk about, and we won't go through every chapter, we don't have time, but in the first part, you talk about better living through chemistry.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that was the saying that we started in America back in, I guess, the 50s and the 60s, and all those big chemical corporations started to come out, DuPont, and, better living through chemistry is what we were promised. I remember growing up and going to my grandmother's house, and she didn't serve us lowly orange juice. No, we had something way better than orange juice. We had Tang. Tang was developed by, NASA for the astronauts to take into space, right? And it was fully fortified. So we were sold the promise that things were better thanks to chemistry. We were told that Tang was better than orange juice because it had, things added to it that we needed, when really that is not true at all. Now it seems comical, but so many things that we found out over time were a really bad idea, like DDT. They were spraying it on the fields. They're like, this is amazing. They're like, oh, wait, no, it's not really amazing at all. It's killing the birds. And, over time, we realized some of these things that we thought were great actually have a lot of harms associated with them. Roundup is an example of that. Glyphosate, that's sprayed on the crops so that we have a higher yield. Well, we have a higher yield, maybe that solves one problem of, farming and the farmland and, feeding more people. That seems like a really great idea. But on the flip side, now we have the chemicals from that pesticide getting into the foods that we're eating and builds up in our bodies. And so our toxic load goes up, and that's not normal for us to have, these man-made chemicals in our bodies, and our bodies don't know what to do with them. So, the whole idea of better living through chemistry, like, oh, we're going to make these artificial sweeteners and everyone's going to lose weight because they're 0 calorie. But when you look at the research, people who use artificial sweeteners are more likely to be a higher weight than people who don't. So the promise is just not really, we could talk about why that is. There are a lot of theories as to that, from, dysregulate your gut microbiome to, metabolic confusing signals, all sorts of things related to that. But or even, maybe it's just people who are overweight tend to drink those. There's no cause and effect at all. It's just a coincidence, which is also possible. But I think we would agree that we're not better off than we were in general health-wise. If you look back to how people used to eat, maybe they had a lot more, infectious diseases, but now we have other problems from the chemicals. We have metabolic syndrome. We have all sorts of, if we look around, we can see people are not healthier. They might not be dying of the infectious diseases like smallpox anymore as much as before, but we have other problems.
Yeah, no doubt. So the next couple of chapters, you talked briefly about, dishwashing detergent and stuff, but you get into household cleaning products, and then I'm going to also group in there personal care products. So what are some of maybe the worst ones out there that stand out, and then maybe give us some practical tips on those of, a good place to start in changing some of that.
And it's, again, it is very scary when you start realizing all these, these scary words like endocrine disruptors, these chemicals that are in these products that actually affect the way our endocrine system works, the way our hormones work in our bodies. Like, for example, they might mimic the work of hormones, and then our hormones are not working properly, or they bind to the receptors where the hormones should be binding, and then our bodies can't do what they need to do because the chemicals are in the way. So we want to get these chemicals that are not good for our bodies out of our products as much as we possibly can. And that is where you can rely on things like these apps, like the Environmental Working Group app. There's also one that I don't even know if it was out yet, but a friend told me about it. It's called, oh gosh, is it? Now I can't remember. Think Dirty, maybe? I can't remember.
Yep.
And no. That's not it. Switch Natural. This is the one. The new one is called Switch Natural. Friend told me about it, and you have to pay for it. And the Switch Natural person doesn't even know I exist. I mean, maybe she does. I'm not sure, but it's a great app because it allows you to take a photo of any ingredients list, and then through the magic of phones and, artificial intelligence or whatever, it reads the list and it tells you what is in there that might be dangerous and why.
Yeah.
So you can literally use it with any ingredients list.
And Think Dirty is one.
I
thought that sounded familiar, and that's what I have on my phone. I don't use it enough.
Think Dirty is one of them, but Switch Natural is the one. You have to pay for it.
Okay.
And I'm not affiliated with her at all, like I said, but it's a great app. For me, though, the easiest thing is I don't want to have to fool around with trying to figure out if something's good or bad, or safe or not, clean or not clean. So what I do is I just have a set it and forget it, like the Ronco, remember the commercials, the infomercials. I would set it and forget it if they were making dinner on a rotisserie or something. That's what I like to do with my products. I use a certain brand of cosmetics that has very, very high standards. Everything they make is safe. Everything they put out. So I don't have to worry because they have done the work for me. So that's just one way I've made it easy, and they work. And then same with my cleaning products. There's a core set of products that I use. You really don't need as many things as you think. You don't need 75 different cleaning products in your house, which, that sounds like a crazy number, but I counted how many I had in my house at that time, and I think it was like 75 different things. You don't need a separate thing to clean your countertop, also to clean this and to clean that. You don't need all that. So I've just really made it simple by finding safe products, and then I don't have to do all the, the searching every time. It's just really, really easy. Now, notice the title of the book is Clean-ish, because you're not going to be perfect. You're going to have to decide, where are you willing to, take certain chances or use products that aren't as clean as other products. For me, the example, and I talk about this in Cleanish, it's deodorant. Like, we all know we should be using natural deodorant. We all know that. And I do use natural deodorant for a large part of the year, but I live in South Carolina now, and it is hot. Like, I live at the beach. And when it is South Carolina summertime and I'm wearing a sleeveless top like I'm wearing today, I need to use regular deodorant. The natural deodorant just doesn't cut it for me. But because I'm really lowering my toxic load in so many other ways, I'm not stressed out about that. I could make a decision that it was that important to me and it didn't matter if I smelled a little bit, and that would be an okay decision as well. But that's the whole point of the book of Cleanish, is to empower you to figure out, okay, what am I really concerned about? Like, I got rid of all the Teflon in my kitchen. That was easy thing to do. The deodorant, not as easy. So I do all the easy things so I can here and there not have to worry.
Okay. So do you feel like there's one thing within like the detergents and the personal care products that people use on a regular basis that are worse than others? Like, shampoos, soaps, they're all kind of.
That's the thing. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of different chemicals in these products. And like, for example, there's one word that's on so many products and it's called fragrance. You don't even know what that is because there are laws in place that they don't have to tell you because of some early laws from, I don't know, decades and decades ago. The word fragrance is protected. It's like a trade secret. They don't have to tell you. So they literally could be hiding anything in your products through the word fragrance and you don't know what it is. So, yeah, but there isn't like a one thing that we can put our finger on, like, here's the one thing you have to avoid. That would be really easy. There's just so many different things. Like most of us know to avoid BPA, right? You know, we're looking for BPA free. Well, it turns out something they're replacing BPA with, BPS perhaps, just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah.
So we just have to be really, really careful, just in general, and just try to avoid, like for example, when I have an espresso machine. It's a little coffee machine. It has the little capsules, but I don't buy the ones that are plastics. I don't want the plastic and the hot. So I buy one that's, it's like it's in a biodegradable capsule instead, or you can use like something that's metal, for example, instead of the hot plastics. So just little things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, your next few chapters, you talk about diet, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I mean, this shouldn't be anything new for my listeners. We talk about diet and nutrition a lot, about eating real food. I tell people that if nothing else, obviously there's all kinds of diets out there, but if nothing else, eat real whole foods with one ingredient or 1 to 2 ingredients. And if you do that, you're going to be doing better than most people out there, especially if you throw in things, like fasting and all those other.
Absolutely.
But, so kind of summarize the next few chapters for us as far as, talking about the ultra processed foods and then what an actual healthy diet looks like to you.
All right. Well, the interesting thing about ultra processed foods, I'm actually really glad they started using that terminology a few years ago, because before that, all we had was like the word processed foods, right? We said processed foods, but then you start thinking about it and you're like, well, cheese is a processed food. And, like if you take corn on the cob and you shuck it and you cut off the kernels, that's now processed. Or if you grind it into whatever, if you're grinding it in your home mill or something, you're processing it. So the real distinction is when you start getting into ultra processed foods, because that's when you start getting into the factory kind of stuff and it strips the nutrients, strips the fiber. Our bodies do not know what to do with ultra processed foods. I actually think of them as not food, really. They're not. And so, all the research that's out there about any topic in the health world, you're going to find contradictory stuff. The one thing I've never found is anything contradictory about ultra processed foods. I've never seen a study that showed ultra processed foods are great for us. Every study you look at when they look at ultra processed foods shows that they give us worse health outcomes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's pretty solid that our bodies just are not meant to be eating these foods. Again, I'm cleanish. So does that mean I never have an ultra processed food? No. But the whole idea is you want to crowd them out by eating mostly real foods. I'm clean-ish.
Sure.
And real food is really what our bodies know what to do with. Now, that being said, we're all different. We have bioindividuality, meaning that some people do better with more carbs or fewer carbs or more fat or less fat. And it's just, the way your friend eats and finds great success might not be the way that you find great success. Your gut microbiome is different. Your genetics are different. Even dairy, for example, there about 25% of us are lactase persistent, meaning that genetically we've evolved, our ancestors used dairy and they continue to be able to digest the enzyme lactase is persistent, meaning remains present into adulthood. Whereas 75% of the population doesn't have that. And so they have a lot of trouble with dairy. More people have trouble with dairy than don't have trouble with dairy. I'm luckily lactase persistent, celebrate that every day. Dairy works well for me. But the whole idea is that we're all different. And the whole point of Cleanish and the part about food specifically is to empower people to figure out what foods make them feel great. I don't have to buy a diet book and hear what this diet guru thinks we should all be eating. because that diet guru may have a completely different genetic background than me, or a different gut microbiome than me, different metabolic profile than me. And so it just is going to depend on my own body. That food might be exactly the wrong food for me. And over time, our body lets us know. If you're feeling better and better, that's a good sign. If you're feeling worse and worse, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
So, your best bet is to prioritize real foods and pay attention to how you feel after you eat them.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Well said. So you talk about the self-cleaning pathways. I think you mentioned it briefly. That's kind of the part 2 of your book. And so what are some ways that we can support our body's kind of
Our self-cleaning.
Our self-cleaning? What can we do to help with that?
Well, this is where the fasting has a piece in there. So this is not an intermittent fasting book. So people who are like, I don't want to do intermittent fasting, I'm never going to do intermittent fasting. This book is still for them, because intermittent fasting is just one small part of self-cleaning. Of course, I like to hope that anyone reading the chapter about intermittent fasting would realize it's a great, healthy way to live. Maybe you don't need to lose weight, you don't want to lose weight. Intermittent fasting is still a great way to live, because when we are not eating all of our waking hours, our bodies have time to take out the cellular trash. Processes such as autophagy are upregulated. That's where our bodies are recycling old junky proteins. And the fasting gives us a chance to do that. So a lot of the diseases of aging happen because autophagy decreases as we get older. But with fasting, we can keep those processes going strong, and it can help us age better. I'm 53. I want to age really, really well, and I want to keep autophagy going strong. So I think intermittent fasting and having that period of digestive rest every day where my body can do the repair that it needs to do is super important. And it takes out the trash. If you were having a party at your house, 24/7, and you never took the trash out, imagine how junked up your house would get. Well, the same thing in our bodies. If we never take a pause from eating, our bodies just get overwhelmed and stuff builds up. So intermittent fasting is one great way to let your body self-clean. Also, food. Food supports our self-cleaning, because our liver, our kidney, all of our all the organs in our bodies that are designed to filter and clean and detox us, like our liver, they need support from the foods that we're eating. The phytochemicals, the vitamins, the minerals that we're supposed to take in. And you're not getting that if you're eating the standard American diet, and even if you're just like popping a vitamin pill. Because what's so cool about real food is that we don't even really know all the things that are in it. They've done research on I can't think off the top of my head, a certain vitamin or mineral. And they thought, well, this is a really powerful one, so let's give everybody this. Because it came from, I don't know, tomatoes, for example. They're like, I'm just going to use lycopene as an example. That's not the study I'm thinking about, or maybe it is, but let's just say lycopene from tomatoes. We've all heard of that. So then you give everybody the lycopene supplement, and it doesn't have the same expected results that they were expecting, because maybe that wasn't even really the thing in there that was doing the good work. They just thought that it was, because there's thousands of compounds in your tomato. And we can't isolate one thing out of that tomato and say, here's the one thing, here's a pill that will replace that, because all the chemicals in there work synergistically together in your body. And they support your body's organs that are doing the work of detoxing that we need to have happen. I don't know. Did I explain that okay?
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah. And I don't know if you threw this in your book, but people have heard me talk about sauna therapy. I'm a big fan of sauna therapy, just to get rid of toxins.
In there.
Is it in there? Okay,
yep.
Great. Yeah. So I'm a big sauna guy, just because, and I need to clean up some things in my own life. I do okay. Maybe, I don't know if I'd be considered cleanish or not, but, at the end of the day, I'm like, well, I'm getting some stuff out in the sauna. So big fan of that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of saunas as well. And I do have them in there. And it was so funny as I was researching all the things that were taught are great for detox. I didn't put anything in the book if I couldn't support it, you know, and there's a lot of science related to using a sauna. Also earthing or grounding. Are you familiar with that?
I am. Yeah.
I figured you would be, but
yeah.
I was like, well, it sounds really woo-woo, right? Like earthing, putting your feet on the ground and cleaning out your electrical charge, but there's a lot of science that supports that. And even that it's so anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
We need to be, close to the ground, touching the ground, walking on the earth with bare feet. And think about people who never touch the ground ever. Like they are always with shoes on in their cars, never touching the earth.
Yeah.
And all that, the buildup of the electrical charge. It sounds crazy until you really start digging in, but there's great research supporting the power of that.
No, there is. And we've gone the complete other way of not only are we not getting any kind of grounding, but now we're using hand sanitizers about, 20 times a day and every time you turn around. And so, we're killing our natural flora, not, our kids aren't getting dirty. They're not getting, barefoot. And so, you're right. There's a lot of stuff to that. So quick question about intermittent fasting. And I know that's not the kind of the purpose of this book, but I used to do a lot of intermittent fasting, and I found, I'm a very active guy. I do some really intense workouts, and I think I was doing it too often because I felt like, and I wasn't doing anything extreme, but probably just a 16, 17-hour fast on most days.
Right.
But I found that I felt like my cortisol level was probably high. I didn't check it, but that's what I felt like. Wasn't sleeping as good. And so now I do it maybe twice a week is all.
Right.
And the other days I'm eating pretty regularly. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you did a great job listening to your body, because in Fast, Feast, Repeat, which was just my intermittent fasting book, I talk about the fact there's no one right way that's best for everybody. There's a chapter called Tweak It Till It's Easy. And it could just as easily have been called Tweak It Till It Feels Good. If it doesn't feel good, that's a sign that it's not right for you. And what is too much fasting for your body might be not enough fasting for my body. And it's just a matter of really paying attention. And if you are starting to feel worse and worse, that's a sign you need to step back. My husband does a daily 16-8, and that's right for him. He never needed to lose weight, but he's not as active probably as you are. I mean, he's still active. He's out in the yard. He's doing stuff. He started going to water aerobics with me, which is really funny. Funny to see him doing that, but he's, building the muscle that way. He just retired from being a college professor, so he's figuring out how to fill his time. But he skips breakfast every day. He has lunch and he has dinner. And that works really well for him. He's done that now for years. He never needed to lose weight. I have a daily eating window, anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, which might sound really short, but that's how I feel my best. I've been doing this since 2014 and I feel great. I'm also a volume eater. So I'm somebody who eats hearty meals during my eating window. And, if I'll have a day where I eat less, the next day I find that I need to eat a little bit more, and my body just lets me know. So when it comes to intermittent fasting, you want to find something that feels good. If it feels good, that's a really good sign. There's one train of thought that I don't agree with, and that is that, just keep fasting on and on and on. I call that the fasting Olympics. And I do not want you to feel like you're competing in the fasting Olympics where more and more is better.
Yeah.
But I don't want people to be afraid of it either. You're not doing it every day. I am doing it every day. You feel better not doing it every day. I wouldn't feel my best if I didn't do it every day. Even if I have an 8-hour eating window, that's a long eating window for me. And I start to feel a little sluggish and not as good. So it's just a matter of, like I said, tweaking it till it's easy, and you'll find your sweet spot. And that will probably not be the same as what it is for me. We're all very different. Some people prefer a morning eating window. I am an evening eating window person. I've tried it all the ways, over the years. I've done a lot of experimenting, but, I certainly felt terrible when I didn't fast at all, when I was 210 pounds and obese and had a huge waist. My midsection was huge. I couldn't paint my toenails.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And now, my waist measurement is on the very lean side, for a 53-year-old woman. So it's just a matter of figuring out what gives you the health that you're looking for and the way that you feel your best.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. You look great for 53, by the way. So
Thank you.
You're doing something right. So, so the last part is basically how we become cleanish. And
Mhm.
so, again, when I've talked to people about this, I think they sometimes get overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
so, give us maybe like what's first things we should get rid of, just maybe a stepwise approach of how we can become more cleanish.
Well, here's the beauty of the book Cleanish, in that at the end of every chapter, there's a point for you to pause and to take you can take a look around, see what you've got. You're reflecting on what's in your cabinets, what's in your pantry, what's in your bathroom. And then you're going to take action and say, well, what changes can I make? I'm not going to tell you these are the things you need to get rid of. You're going to decide that. What are the things you're worried about? What changes are you willing to make right now? You're like, okay, I'm going to get rid of my Teflon pans. That's easy. That's a huge step, because every time you cook a meal in those Teflon pans, those are getting into your foods. And so you're going to proceed at your own pace, and you're not going to be scared. Now, when the book first came out, I had a book study in my community, and people were like, the first week, they're like, I'm so excited. Then week 2, they're like, oh my God, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, no, no, no. And then they're like so scared and upset that they don't want to do anything, and they just want to forget it. Like, an ostrich, bury your head in the sand. And so, you know, yes, maybe ignorance is bliss, but knowledge is power. And so when you're reading it, there are going to be times when you're overwhelmed, and you're going to want to put it down for a little while, and then you're going to come back to it. And you're just going to know that every change that you make on your own terms, every change is helpful. You're not going to be worse off because you stopped using the Teflon pans or you switched to natural deodorant for most of the year. You're not going to be worse off when you're eating more real foods and less ultra processed foods. So think of it as a continuum, right? It's cleanish. You might be starting over here, and here is perfection. You're never going to get there. I'm not going to ever get there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be maybe more like here. At some days I might be, you're always on that continuum. And knowing that everything that you do that's a positive step is helping your body to be healthier long term. And so getting that all or nothing out of your mind, that's where the ish comes in. And the ish is very, very important, because you don't want to be such a perfectionist that you're like, well, if I can't do it all, I'm going to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not helping at all. So do the things you can do. Take your time. This is a book that's meant to be worked on for a year, or come back to it. Maybe you read a chapter today and you see what you can do and you focus on that. And there's an implementation plan at the end where you're deciding what you want to focus on first. Like maybe first you want to tackle, your personal care products because that's easier. Or maybe your cleaning products are actually the easiest thing because you're like really, you love your makeup and you don't want to change it yet, but you can go to your pantry and look there. It's all about where you're willing to start and what feels like the first step. But it really, it snowballs. You start small, you make little changes. You're like, oh, that didn't hurt at all. My hair is lovely, even though I'm using a really natural, shampoo now. And you just find the things that work, and you realize that they're even more enjoyable to use than the things you used to use. And step by step, you're getting healthier over time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. I love it. Love the book, and we just kind of barely touched the surface. So I'd encourage people to look at it. Clean-ish is the title. Jen Stevens. And so what are you doing these days? You still hosting your podcast?
I am. I'm Intermittent Fasting Stories. It comes out twice a week now.
Okay.
So every Tuesday, every Thursday. It is rolling along. We've had millions and millions and millions of listens, which is surprising. Today, I was so excited. I got to meet the person who was episode 2 almost
wow.
4 years ago. She's vacationing here at this beach, and I heard through a friend. We'd never met in person. And she said, oh, Lynn is here in Surfside Beach where you are. So I messaged her, and we got together and had coffee on the beach house porch
awesome.
this morning. So Intermittent Fasting Stories it's just very inspirational, hearing all the different ways that people have had their life change. And, before she left, she said, my life is changed because I found intermittent fasting, 4 years later from the time that we talked. She has a health, it is such a life-changing way to live.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, congratulations on that, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And on the move and everything. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, so as I always do, as I wrap up here, I ask my guests if they could give us one health tip that could make us healthier today. What would you say to that?
Well, it's that unless you are pregnant, breastfeeding a child, or underweight, intermittent fasting is really something that could help your health. And I think everyone should be doing some of it because we want to have that increased autophagy. Don't be scared of intermittent fasting. If you've tried it before and it didn't work for you, then you need fast, feast, repeat. You need to learn about the clean fast. You need to learn about giving it time. And if you think it doesn't work for you, I guarantee there's probably something you weren't quite doing right. Read Fast, Feast, Repeat, and you will see how to make it a lifestyle that feels fabulous.
Great. Okay. Well, great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. And I
Well, thank you for
appreciate,
having me.
appreciate everyone listening. And we will just talk to you next time.
All right.